today's objectives, focusing on how to communicate innovative ideas. Tim and Teresa will share tips, strategies, and tools. And in terms of application, there will be two particular specific ways. One is through our session on Thursday, when you'll be in breakout groups. You'll be working together and then communicating. You'll be sharing how you would pursue, implement your actions, and then also in your home countries afterwards, how you would, we believe this program will help you to communicate your action plans for your particular countries. Okay, before I introduce Teresa, who will give the first presentation, maybe it would be good if you just could quickly introduce yourself, give your name, the ministry where you work at, and your country, so we all start to get to know each other. Maybe based on the screen, if we can start with the India resident mission, please.
Good afternoon. I am Udaya Kumar. I am working as Additional Budget Officer in Government of India, Ministry of Finance, New Delhi.
I am Manil Mutwani from the India Resident Mission of ADB.
Okay, thank you very much. Vietnam Resident Mission?
Yes.
If you could introduce yourself. Name?
Ready?
Yes, please.
Then, environment department of the. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And in Tajikistan?
Hi, I'm Farouk Nuridinov. I am ADB staff. I'm senior project officer.
Okay, thank you. And in Sri Lanka, please.
I'm Vikramasekara. I am the General Manager of Ceylon Electricity Board, Sri Lanka.
Okay, warm welcome to you. Mr. Pokana in PNG.
Yes, my name is Mr. Pokana, and I'm the Managing Director for the Climate Change and Development Authority board.
Thank you very much. In Georgia, our Georgia resident mission?
Hello, I'm Ekaterine. I work for the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources Protection of Georgia.
Welcome. Jay, maybe if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Jay. I'm Senior Natural Resource Management Specialist in the Pacific Department.
Thank you. And I think we have two resident mission staff in Bangladesh, please, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Elma Morsheda, working as Senior Project Officer at Bangladesh Resident Mission.
Okay, thank you. And finally in Cambodia.
I'm Chansina.
Good afternoon.
Okay, and
Yes.
yes, and
Sina
you're
speaking.
okay, and you're with the Ministry of
Jansen
Water
Sina.
Resources? Sorry, please.
Yes. I'm Chansina, working waters of the Rogers, Cambodia, and my responsibility for the first upland and the flood 2003 by ADB. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. It's a good way to already start to get to know you before we meet in Seoul, Korea. Now it is my pleasure to be introducing Teresa Erickson, who will give our first presentation on explaining your idea or innovation. Really, I could say so much about Teresa, but to summarize, she's president of Intermedia Communications Training. She's designed and led workshops around the world for clients such as the World Bank, IMF, ADB, WHO, and the UN. She's also worked with government ministries and parliamentarians. For many years, she was with Voice of America. That responsibility included being an executive producer and host of a weekly public affairs show, which had 90 million listeners, so 90 million listeners. She's won many awards for her documentaries, and as I mentioned, she has really helped ADB in just communicating much more effectively. So really is a treat to have Teresa with us. So really, without any further ado, I hand over to Teresa, please.
Hello, welcome everyone. We're so excited to be here with you. We're always excited to talk to people whose goal is to change the world. And we're passionate about how you can use communication in order to do that. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Tim. He's going to give a background of our approach to what is the nugget of the power of communication in order to create transformation. And then I'm going to get into the practical application of the theory. So here's Tim Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tim. And Victor, we're ready to have the PowerPoint up. If you could put explaining your idea or innovation on the screen, please. So for Teresa and I, one of the most interesting ideas that we've run into in our 30 years as professional communicators is the idea of the meme, M-E-M-E. Now, some of you might have heard this word before on the internet. Internet memes is something that you commonly hear. An internet meme is something that gets passed around on the internet. So it might be a cute cat video or a picture which is humorous that people pass it on. So that's an informal meaning of a very important formal concept. A meme is an idea that's meant to be passed on. The idea came from the philosopher of science Richard Dawkins, who was the first to notice that ideas are very similar to genes. Genes, our genetic code, is a way of encoding information chemically in our DNA that gets passed on from parents to their children or offspring, so that species over time evolve and adapt to their environment. Ideas, similarly, are information that is encoded electrically in the neural patterns of our brains. And those ideas help us adapt to our environment. The difference is we can pass ideas on through language from person to person very, very quickly, whereas genetic evolution takes place slowly. Mimetic evolution, change of ideas, happens very quickly. Now, what are some of the kinds of things you could think of then as memes? It can be something as simple and fun as an emoticon, or something as big and profound as the idea of a carbon footprint, which changes how we use energy. It can be something annoying that gets stuck in your head like a song. Or it can be something as simple as a technology like a mobile phone. That mobile phone, which in itself is like an idea. We see someone with a phone and we think, oh, I want that too. And so the idea spreads. The key to understanding a meme is it's an idea that spreads through a population. Now, the big mistake most people make when they communicate is they think about sharing an idea as sharing it one-to-one, or one to a group if you're doing a presentation. And they think their only audience is the people in front of them, and they just work on giving the idea to them. But to turn your idea into a meme, you should express it so that your audience, the people you speak to, when they get your idea, they pass it on themselves to other people. So you have to explain your idea in a way that its information is clearly, easily going to be encoded so that others can get it. Then ideas can spread widely. That's where you get transformation communication. When it comes to development, the ideas that development specialists and people in governments work with tend to be not very good names. They tend to be long and rather jargony and hard for people to understand, so they don't easily succeed in being passed on. And here's just some examples on this page for you to take a look at. For everybody in the VC, you might be able to think of some ideas that are expressed in ways that are difficult for people to understand in your own context, whatever country you're working in. I'm sure that there are some jargony technical memes that you struggle to explain and spread. So now, how to take this idea of memes and turn your language into something that helps the ideas spread, that's the key to effective communication. And I'm going to turn it back over to Teresa now, and she'll give you some tips and tools for doing this effectively.
Tim explained the theory behind memes and the power of memes, and now I'm going to drill down to a practical level. We have this idea of meme theory, this idea that communication to be the most successful is really when it can be passed on to others, not just what you say to one person. So we analyzed what are those special communication moments that people, when they hear it, they immediately, it perks them up and they remember it and then they want to say it to someone else. And what I found is that there are really 4 elements that make for a really great message or clearly articulated idea that works really well for getting it passed on. So let's take a look at the first one. The first one is simplification. If your message is simple, it's much easier for and then be able to say it again to someone else. So you need to be concise. Short sentences work much for spoken communication because we can remember 2 or 3 short sentences better than one long sentence with clauses and words like which and or. So short sentences are better. And here's the problem that I usually see do is people think that their message has to explain everything about their idea. And the truth of the matter is when you talk to people for anywhere from 2 to 20 minutes, no audience is going to remember every word you say. So you have to think about your communication in terms of what will they remember? What are the moments that are going to really spark something in their brains? So think about it from the point of communication moments. And at this point, I like to say that, your messages, especially when they're around your big ideas, are like a flower trying to attract bees to go inside the flower and get at the nectar. Your message is the flower. If you don't have a flower, no bees will come to hear about the importance of the content of your idea. So you need that message as the attractor. So let's take a look at some examples of simplification. This is what not to do. This is not a simple message. This was the IPCC message in a report from 2014 on climate change. A large fraction of both terrestrial and freshwater species faces increased extinction. I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can read it for yourself. This is one sentence, and this is the main message of the report. Not simple. We're trying to explain everything. So we took a crack at trying to simplify this message. This is really what that message was saying. Climate change has put the planet on a path to extinction. More than half of the animals, plants, and fish that we have now may be gone forever. So that's what you want to do with your messages too. You want to go ahead and put the complicated message down, go ahead and write it down, and then see if you can get to the essence of what you're saying. This is a client we worked with, IFC, with one of their recent reports, and I thought this was a nice, clear message. Private sector development is stronger, and the benefits more widespread when women are full participants in the process. This was the main message of an entire report. I thought that was nice and simple. Number 2, be concrete. We remember things that are said in ways that create pictures in our minds. So use word pictures. If I say to you a pink elephant with a blue hat, immediately you're thinking about a pink elephant with a blue hat. And when you engage people in the image making part of their brain, you're also, because you're speaking, engaging the left hemisphere language part of the brain. So now when you use pictures and language, you're speaking to people and you're activating both sides of the brain. This is when people are completely with you and they're not thinking about something else. So anything that's visual is really powerful. So that means can't use things like unfamiliar jargon, technical terms, or acronyms when it comes to expressing your main ideas so that people will remember them. This means you have to make sure that you have an ear for what is conceptual language that is not going to capture people's attention. So instead of transport infrastructure, do you mean a road? Instead of reducing carbon emissions, burn less oil, coal, and gas. Biodiversity is problematic for a lot of people. It really doesn't create those moments that spark interest. Capacity building is one that I hear all the time, and yet it just washes over people. And sometimes you have to say these words, but it's nice if you can say, let's say you're talking about capacity building, and then you say, in this case, I mean teaching people the technical expertise they need in order to, let's say, in this case, it's to build an independent central bank. So be specific whenever you can. We worked with one client in the U.S. that came out with a housing report, and I thought this was a really great message that also conveyed this idea of both simplicity and concreteness. America's housing policy is broken. If we don't fix the foundation, it's only a matter of time before it collapses on all of us. Really nice, memorable, and most reports have really dense messages. So I thought this was nice, simple, and concrete. Here's another organization in the U.S. which I think has such a visual motto and message. We want to fill the skies with waterfowl today, tomorrow, forever. And most people, after hearing it once, they remember this slogan of theirs. Number 3, your messages should be connected to what we care about. And that makes it relevant to us, and so we're more likely to find it important and to want to spread it. This is an NGO called The Girl Effect, which I think always comes up with really great messages or memes for their reports and for their ideas. So this is one of their latest reports, The Birds and the Bees and the SDGs, which is very memorable. And I also, their motto, girls are the most powerful force for change on the planet, is connected to something that we care about. So it's short, it's simple, it's concrete, and it's connected to what we care about. So it has the 3 elements that we've talked about so far. Number 4 is catchy. So we've had simple, concrete, connected, and if your message is also catchy, if it has some rhyme, some alliteration, if it's got some dramatic words, that also helps it be spreadable. So we also often hear reuse, reduce, reuse, recycle. That's got 3 R's in it. It's very simple and it's very catchy. We worked with a group in the U.S. that had this message for their report: giving women access to contraceptives saves lives, saves money, saves the planet. So it's got the 3 repetitious of saves, and it's also intriguing. So it doesn't really explain everything, but it makes people want to ask questions, which is really something you want to do with your messages. I hear this one all over the world, and no one can remember who came up with it. I tried a Google search, and I couldn't find out who came up with this first. Go green, there is no planet B. And I hear world leaders repeating this phrase when they speak about climate change. At the COP21 in Paris, this was up in lights on the Eiffel Tower. So very powerful because it's very catchy. This is an example of a before and after of a message that we helped a group work on. This was a report about public-private partnership in health. And this was their main slide that they wanted government ministers to remember. Public-private engagement at the systems level can and should be improved in Africa. So they already did some work on simplification there, but it wasn't good enough. So we worked on them to come up with a phrase or a theme for this report that would be catchier. And this is what they came up with. That's the after of that slide. The power of two, seeing with two eyes, working with two hands. Much catchier. Now that you've said that message, now the next thing you can talk about is going deeper and explaining what you mean by seeing with two eyes and working with two hands. So it's the flower of your message. It attracts people to want to come in and hear more. These are the 4 C's to communicating your ideas. You want to be concise, concrete, connected to what we care about, and catchy. If you have those 4 elements, people will remember your message and they'll want to pass it on. I noticed at the latest World Economic Forum in Davos, at the end of the meeting, they came out with a series of what they thought were the memes from this year's forum. And I thought it was interesting to take a look at 2 of them that they chose. So here's one. For workers, there are no jobs on a dead planet. It's very catchy. It's also visual. This one from Melinda Gates. Goals are only wishes unless you have a plan. That's really catchy too. Very simple. See how short these are. And I also think it's interesting that more and more conferences are starting to do that. They're starting to compile summaries of all the talk that's gone on. And yet this is what they boil down, 3 or 4 days of talks into. These messages that capture people's attention and that they're more likely to remember. So you can talk on and on for 20 minutes, but no one will remember that 20-minute speech. They're likely to remember these messages that you put out that are very short. And yet, because they remember these catchy things that you say, they're more likely to remember a lot more of what you've said. And if you don't have these special communication moments, are people going to remember anything that you say? There's so many times that I've gone to conferences and I'll come out of a session, a 90-minute session, and I'll turn to someone and say, so what did you think was special about that? What was that talk all about for you? What do you remember? And they say, I don't know, it's just a lot of talk. So that's what you don't want people to say when you're speaking to people. Now I'd like you to think about how you want to start to communicate like this. So I'd like you to write down your idea, even if it's in its most complicated form, and then revise it according to the 4 C's, making it concise, concrete, connected, and catchy. And we'll take 5 minutes for this. And then I would love to hear if any of you would like to share your before and after ideas. We can make some comment on them. Does anyone have a message they'd like to share?
I'm Vikramasekara from Sri Lanka.
Welcome.
Yeah. I just want to give a message about reducing energy consumption. So my message goes as, consume what you earn from the sun and not what you have saved.
That's a very good one. I love it. It's very relatable and connected to what we care about, and it's really catchy too. So, and I really like the juxtaposition of earn and save. So very nice, very catchy. Okay. Anyone else?
Jay, I think you had one. Did you want to share? Jay?
I have one only because it's so terrible, so maybe you can help me improve it. I actually just gave a presentation like an hour ago, and I was discussing a program And I said the overall objective of the program was strengthen institutional capacity to identify and manage climate and safeguard risks in the aid program, which to me makes perfect sense. But after listening to you talk, perhaps nobody else could understand it. So I was thinking about shortening it to something like climate and environment risks are managed better. But it still doesn't sound catchy. I don't have sons and buying and sellings and catchy words and stuff like that. So I went from the long one to climate and environment risks are managed better.
I guess I'm missing when you do what.
Sorry?
Because I feel like there's something that needs to be explained about the managed better if we do what.
Well, that's where the word institutional capacity was in the previous one, but you said that kind of, those sorts of words are not, not very tangible. So I just sort of took it out.
Yeah. But I like the beginning, climate and environment risks together. I really like the way that, in 3 words, you're getting across already a really big idea in a much catchier way. So climate and environment risks are manageable when what's stronger. So institutional capacity you can call stronger, but now I need to know what needs to be stronger.
Well, the capacity of the organization that we work with is now better.
Okay, so Tim has an idea for.
Okay, here's just a general idea. Remember, this is the flower that then makes people interested enough to hear more. Tomorrow's climate disasters can be reduced if we learn to manage climate risks today.
Okay. Is that getting to what you're trying to get across? Because that could be the first sentence, and then you can explain the institutional capacity in the next sentence.
Okay.
So I could imagine you saying, the sentence that Tim just gave you, and then you could ask a rhetorical question. So how do we do that? And then you need another great message for institutional capacity.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? And if we don't have any more messages that you'd like to share, I'm also open to answer any questions that you might have.
Shall I volunteer any? Oh, Joyce. Okay. Shall I volunteer anybody? Mr. Pokana, do you have anything you'd like to have Tim and Teresa's expert advice on?
Yes, I was just looking at the building capacity of communities to be resilient to the impacts of climate change. And looking at that sentence, I just came up with this short version. I said, building capacity today saves lives tomorrow on climate change.
Beautiful. Really short, really catchy. I can see it on posters at the top of a report. If someone said that during a conference speech, I would remember it. It's really lovely. It's really nice.
Thank you.
And we'll have more time for Q&A after Tim's section. I do want to turn it over to Tim so that we can have time for his section as well. So Victor, should I turn it over to you before I go to Tim, or should we go directly to Tim?
We can go directly to Tim, but I did Tim a disservice by not introducing him properly. So everybody, you've heard from Tim already, but just a quick intro, which is that Tim is responsible for Intermedia's Asia and Africa operations. And he also has conducted many media workshops around the world, worked with World Bank, IMF, ADB, African Development Bank, UNDP, as well as World Wildlife Fund for Nature, WWF. And his experiences include being a journalist, whether for magazine, newspaper, radio, and he is also an author of books, whether on Asian life and culture or many other ideas. So just that before I turn it over to you, Tim, for the second part of the presentation.
Okay, Victor, thank you. I'm all ready to go. If you would please put up the first slide. So we're going to talk now about how to take your idea or your innovation and put that into a context which can make people really interested in it and really want to listen to it. Now, this is particularly something that's going to be useful for you participants when you go back to your own countries and you're going to be filled with new ideas, exposure to some great innovations from your time in Korea, and you're going to want to share this with your ministries, with in other branches of the government and other parts of the country who are also concerned about environment and climate change. So we're going to give you a framework, a formula for sharing your innovations in a way that makes people really interested in what you have to say. The problem that we often face when we want to communicate something new to other people is we tend to think of sharing our new knowledge as like a computer data transfer. We think that our experience we can just simply download into the mind of another person. And I'd like you each to think about times when you've spoken to somebody else as if what you're saying, they'll just simply take it and immediately learn it and know it just as you know it. Sadly, that's not what often happens when we try to share, especially new ideas, because you are giving people something new, something they don't know already. And this is what we most often find happens, that our new ideas literally seem to bounce off other people without going in. Have you ever had the experience of talking for half an hour to somebody about something, and then they ask you a question which makes it clear they haven't really understood what you've been saying at all? We run into this with our clients all the time. So here's a key to helping you be effective when it comes to sharing new ideas. Communicating your ideas or your innovative thoughts is easier when you do it in a narrative or a storytelling form. Now, what do we mean by narrative? A narrative or a story is a way of sharing information by putting it into a tale of things that happen that lead to other things. Our histories are usually encoded in great stories, and these stories are often found in books that societies, hang on to and really see as telling them who they are. Books like the Mahabharata, or this image is from the Bhagavad Gita, also from the Quran, with the many stories of the founding of Islam. The Bible, the stories of Judaism and the stories that Christianity comes from are other examples. As are great works of literature like in China, The Journey to the West, great epic poems from ancient Greece and Mesopotamia. These are how our heritage comes to us. So we human beings have a tendency to want to learn and understand things through stories. Now, when it comes to sharing your ideas, we have a very simple 3-part formula that you can follow that helps you do this well. I'm going to go through these 3 parts in an overview, then I'm going to go through them in detail. The first part is describing the problem. You have to do this swiftly, and then say why your idea is necessary to help solve the problem. The second part is the action, explaining how your idea will work, what needs to be done. And the third part is the result. Talk about what your idea will change. How will things be different when your idea has been put into action? Now, I want you to notice at this point that we're not telling a story of the past. This is not history. The narrative change is telling a story of the possible future. So you are inviting your audience to join them in a story of what could happen if we act on your idea or innovation. I'm now going to go through these 3 steps one by one. The first step is to identify the problem. So you want to start off by stating the problem concisely. And one of the big problems we see when people communicate their ideas is they spend way too much time discussing the problem. There's two difficulties with this. The first is, if the person you're speaking to already kind of understands the problem, then you're going to start to bore them. They're going to stop listening. The second problem is that if people don't know what the problem is, they may not be able to grasp its significance no matter how long you go on talking about it. So the best scenario is to speak with people who already understand what your problem is and just very quickly and concisely tell them the problem that you're going to work on, and then spend a little bit of time talking about why solving this problem is important. Again, you want to do this concisely. The reason you talk about why it's important to solve this problem is that triggers the values of your audience. It triggers what makes them care about this issue. Okay, so having explained the problem concisely, now you're going to deliver your idea and the actions that it will take to put your idea into practice. Now here, the mistake many people make is they start explaining the parts of the idea without giving people what we call the big picture. This is usually where you have your meaning. The big picture idea that clearly states your main idea. So here's what often happens. When people start explaining a problem, they explain it like little pieces of a puzzle one at a time. But if people are only getting these little ideas one at a time, they're not able to see what you're really talking about. And so at the end, they end up just with a pile of puzzle pieces. So that's what your audience ends up with, just this big mass of words. Instead, what you want to do is give them the big picture first. Think of that as like the box of the puzzle. The box of the puzzle that shows the big picture helps people then understand how the pieces of your idea can fit into place. So I'm going to give you an example now of the before and after of this. So, if I were talking about solar energy, and if I were doing this with the little pieces idea, I might come to you and I might try to explain my idea like this. You know, solar powers are really cheap these days, and our country has a big need for energy, and there's new pricing mechanisms that can be really, really valuable. And at this conference, I learned that technology is also really advanced very quickly, and so many people are putting solar into place that they're really great opportunities, and even private sector businesses are finding that they are having their businesses explode and expand. And in some countries, they're actually achieved 100% energy sufficiency through solar. So we really should do this, and I've got some ideas. You can see this is getting very confusing, right? Because you're getting all the little pieces but no big picture. So now I'll explain how you could talk about solar energy in your country with a big picture point of view. You could say something more like this. I'd like to speak to you about solar energy and how it can bring our country the power we need. Energy for sunlight is abundant. It's everywhere. And now, thanks to technology, it's also quick to install. I'd like to tell you my plan for how we could do that in our country. So I hope you can see here that having the big picture idea up front helps people focus. This is what the person's talking about. And now they can hear the parts of your idea. They can hear your plan of action, and they understand what it's all about. So that's the important thing here. Give the big picture first. Okay, so first, You've explained your idea, the big picture. Then you want to give a simple plan of action. That's describing how it will work. What are the steps it would take to put your idea or innovation into action? The third part of this second step is to talk about what are the challenges or obstacles that your idea might face that you've already thought through and can find a way around. In other words, how feasible or realistic is your idea? And then the fourth step is to tell people, where do we start? What's the thing we can do now to begin to put this plan in action? All right, so that's the second of the three steps. We're going to move now to the final step. The final step is to envision the result. Now, people often leave this out, but it's really important. You want to be able to say, as you've explained your idea, how are things going to be different because of this idea or innovation you want to bring to your country? Specifically, how will people's lives change? What will they be capable of doing that they couldn't do before? It could be something as simple as having the electricity that they need so that their children can study at night. Or it might mean having reliable power so that you can build factories and businesses and industries if you didn't have reliable power before. And then going from the specific change that your innovation can bring, looking at how can this ideal scale up? If we adapt this idea or innovation, what else could be possible so that it creates lasting transformation? And now let me demonstrate how these three parts work together in a specific example. So I'm going to go through these three steps. I'm also leaving this text here for the audience. I'm not going to stick strictly to this text, but they can follow along to get an idea of how I'm doing this. Now I'm going to pretend that I'm somebody who's gone to this conference that's coming up next week, the Asia Leadership Conference, and one of the ideas that I learned about that really excited me was the possibility of bringing electric cars into my country. So here's how I might present this if I were going back and speaking to the mayor of the capital city, for example, or other key people in different ministries. Step one, the problem. Our country automobiles are old. In fact, mostly they're secondhand. They've been bought from other nations. Many of them are old diesel. They pollute the city. They cause lung disease in adults and respiratory illnesses in children. And they certainly contribute to climate change. And when oil prices rise and our government ends up spending millions and millions of dollars on fuel subsidies, and we can't really afford it at a time when we have so many other development needs. So that's the problem and why it's important to solve it. Next step, action. What if we could replace our old cars with affordable, clean electric cars? I've learned recently that electric motor technology now exists, and the prices are coming down very, very rapidly. Those who are pioneering electric cars are actually looking for new markets to move into. So there's an opportunity for us here. The big question is, how do we power electric cars? The good news there is our country actually has excess hydropower. We don't actually use all the power that we generate. We could use that excess hydropower to set up chargings where fuel could literally be free for those who get electric cars. That wouldn't really cost us anything because we're already producing that power. Now, cost used to be an obstacle for bringing in electric cars. And there still would be an expense, especially if we wanted to set up factories to build them. But the good news here is we do qualify for climate fund grants and we can get concessional loans. So the possibility of financing this change is quite real and I believe quite doable. That's the action plan. And then I would end by the first step. I'd say, so as a first step, I'd like to suggest we set up a meeting with the Asia Development Bank and help them figure out what are the financing details that we could realistically put in place to get started. And to step two. Now you're moving to the result. With this plan, I envision that in just as few as 5 years, we could transform our city into a clean, healthy place to live. We could also reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 20%. And we could even be a model that could rival cities like Copenhagen and Stockholm that are seen as the leaders in sustainable cities. And if we chose to build an electric car factory in our city, we could become a regional leader. We could become a place that exports cars and technologies to others. And that would really help people see our country as a leader in the 21st century. So here's a template that you can all use as a very simple way to tell this story of change. The problem, say it succinctly, and then say why solving the problem is important. The action, give the big picture first, that's your mean. Then your plan of action, what are the challenges and obstacles you need to overcome, and what's the first step? And finally, the result. How will your idea or innovation change lives, and what will it take to scale it up for lasting transformation? Now, Victor, it's up to you at this point to make a judgment call. Do you want to give people some time to work on this, or shall we just leave them with the template and we can answer questions about the model?
Maybe the best, how about let's do this democratically, maybe a show of hands. If anybody would like to have a little time, 5 minutes, like for the previous exercise, to think about an issue and then how to turn it into this, use the narrative of change template. Would you like to do that? Or would you like to proceed with questions? I guess those who would like to do the exercise have 5 minutes first. If you could just say, raise your hand. Would anybody like to do that? Do the exercise first, have some time, and then get advice? Okay, so maybe why don't we proceed? Does anybody have questions for Tim and Teresa on the last two presentations? Anybody need any clarification or just want to share some difficulty or challenge in terms of explaining something innovative? I do also want to mention that we can take any questions from those who are not showing up on screen, because we do have 6 other participants who can email us. So if you, please feel free if you have any questions for Tim and Teresa. Does anybody have anything? Want to share an observation about what Tim and Teresa have shared? Something that struck you? Maybe a new approach that you'll take in presenting?
I have one concluding slide.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I'll happily go to that concluding
Yes, please.
on this, which is something
Yes.
normally we would do after a practice session. And that is, after you've told your narrative of change, you want to make sure that there's space for your audience to ask you questions, to further explore the ideas with you. And as they do explore it, they're probably going to come up with ideas of their own that they're going to want to add to yours. It's very important to be open to those other ideas so that it's not just something that is yours that you're asking someone else to accept, but rather you're inviting them to join you in the narrative. And when other people want to offer their ideas to your narrative, they're saying, I want to make this my story too. So you want to be really open to those other ideas. And you can even ask them to join you in taking the first step together. And if the first step that you've suggested doesn't seem to work for them, you can say, well, what do you see as a possible first step? But make sure it's something that your audience will be willing to join you on, so that you end up with the same story, like a journey that you and they are going on together. That's the best way to really motivate people to take part in your idea, is to make them part of your story. Now, we understand that for all of you participants, you're actually at the beginning of a particular journey, the journey called the Asia Leadership Program. And in the next week, you're going to be exposed to so many new ideas and innovations. So this template that we are giving you here is something that you'll be using, I believe, at the end of the program itself, when you're going to be asked to share What have you learned? What problems will these ideas help you solve? So you can use this template in the Asia Leadership Program itself, but especially then use this template after the program is finished and you're going home and you're communicating. We're going to make sure that these two PowerPoint presentations of Teresa and mine are available to you as PDF documents. We'll send them to Victor and he can send them to all of you so that you'll have the notes with you during the course next week and after that. And there's one more thing, Victor, that I think we should mention, and that is that Teresa and I have written about all of these things and much more in our book, The Master Communicator's Handbook. And when we send the PDF notes for these PowerPoints, we'll include a link to that book in case any of your participants want to order it too.
Okay. Thanks very much, Tim, Teresa. I think first, if anybody, just a final opportunity, if anybody has any questions or comments. Is everybody okay? Yes, please.
Yes, I have a...
Please.
Yeah, this is Mohammed Rafi from Afghanistan. I had just a comment and observation. Today we have discussed about innovation and that how to communicate innovation to lead for transformation. And here it was a discussion about explaining the big picture and being precise on problem. For having a clear picture of a problem, there is about facts and figures and about knowledge and information. That to what extent you so this makes the base for a communication, for effective communication, to change the mindset or the mind frame of a person for new innovation. I think with this context, the more about collaboration, even with the local level, community level, with indigenous knowledge, and as well as regional level with the other countries, it makes an effective platform for generation of knowledge, for innovation, and also for effective communication of that, and also for making visible pictures for demonstration and changes. So this was my comment. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And Mohammed, I'd like to add what you said about collaboration is important. So if you take a look at things from a narrative point of view, a great way to establish collaboration, if this is a group that you're meeting for the first time or they're relatively new to the conversation, is to ask them first to talk about what are their challenges. In other words, get them to articulate their own problems and their own narrative, and maybe the solutions that they're already working on, so that rather than imposing your own narrative, your own story of what you want on them, you start by really listening and understanding their narrative and how your ideas may fit into what they are already thinking about or already doing.
And I would say that's usually what's missing when people have conversations of innovation, which is different from when you're pitching an innovation idea. When you're pitching, people are there to hear your idea. But oftentimes people confuse a conversation.
May I say something? Just a comment on the first presentation and how it will help the second presentation. I think the 4C is really helpful to the work that I'm doing. We find it really difficult coming from a country that has more languages, more than 800 languages, and trying to transfer the idea to our local language is quite challenging. And I think the 4C really help us to, for me, driving the team, really help us to be able to get the right message across with the minimum technical jargon that should be in there. So that's my first comment on the first presentation. I think.
Thank you.
On the second presentation, I think it really breaks down how to solve the problem and make it work. And I have a big team that I'm managing. It's good to have some ideas like this so that can help me to manage my own team. And I've seen it before coming to the workshop. I think I have now some good ideas to join the workshop next week. So I'm looking forward to it already. Thank you, team. And
thank you.
yes.
Thank you. And I would just like to say, wow, what challenges trying to get one message across into so many different languages. So you're right. Speaking simply is really useful. Being concrete, in other words, giving people a clear picture, that's a really powerful tool in this case because people can create the same picture in many different languages. You might even think if there is an image of what it is you're trying to create that's a visual image for your country. Just for example, if you were trying to bring in wind energy, I don't know if that's the case, but let's say you were trying to bring in wind energy, then an image of a wind turbine might be a powerful meme in itself. So when you've got a lot of different languages, if you can use a visual image, that image itself can convey the idea better than having to translate it into 800 languages.
Yes, yeah. I think the images will greatly help us to get our meaning across. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, observations, questions? It's like final last opportunity here. Okay, if not, let me wrap up, please. Yes? Oh, looks like there is one question. Just a second, please.
Could I comment on languages?
Yes, please.
Yes, because sometimes, like usually when we conduct conferences or workshops here, we need to use both languages, like Georgian and English and or Russian. But sometimes, like you have like a slogan which sounds very, very good in Georgian and or English, but it sounds like really stupid in any other language. So we found some like middle ground, just sometimes just writing in Latin, like just having English words because they are shorter and they are catchier. But then on the other hand, then people that don't know English, then they are like looking a bit skeptical, like, you know, why you have only English wordings on the banners or posters. So I don't know if there is any solution to this or how people deal with this in general, but we really stumble upon this problem very often. Thank you.
This is just a problem, and it means that sometimes you have to come up with similar but a little bit of different slogans so that you can take advantage of the catchiness of the different language. Absolutely, because it's more important to be catchy than to be have an accurate translation when it comes to developing this meme, this message. So absolutely, it's a challenge, and I find that in terms of, you know, I speak different languages too, that the simpler, it actually helps to be simple, because usually if you have a really simple, concrete message, it's easier to translate that than you have something that's a little bit more complicated with more words.
I would add that even some very simple terms, like in English, we talk about green meaning pro-environmental. And we were working with a group in Mexico a few years ago, and we were trying to help them come up with a good meme that used green as a way of talking about the environment. And they said, in Mexico, green doesn't have anything to do with the environment. There's no meaning of green there. So it's really important, if you've got different language groups, to spend the time in a room together talking about the idea and making sure that it's going to actually resonate with all the different language speakers that you're working with. And here again, I would say that one way to get beyond that is by finding the right visual metaphor. For example, in the environment, many groups have taken really good advantage of those beautiful photographs of the Earth from space. I think so many cultures, so many languages have this resonance of seeing our planet as this blue drop, hanging in the infinity of space. And that to me is just a great example of an image that can really give us a sense of togetherness as a community, and also togetherness as a sense of responsibility for our planet and its environment.
Okay, any other comments?
We use the Earth as a part of our logo for our company as well.
Okay, any final comments, questions? Okay, if not, let me sum up and also highlight next steps. First, the book which Teresa and Tim have written. Let me just show you. This is the Master Communicator's Handbook. It's a terrific book. We have it, we're using it at ADB. I might add, I'm just looking at the back cover of it, and it includes comments, including from the chief economist of the World Bank, who says, Teresa and Tim gave me the confidence to approach public communication without fear and in fact enjoy it. Really, that is how powerful and effective this book is. So please do enjoy it. You can, as Tim mentioned, we're providing the link for it. What else we have that you can continue to take advantage of is we have recorded this, so we'll have that at the web, at the link that you see here, the first bullet. So you can go back there and listen again, and take advantage again. I would like to highlight, for those of you who didn't have a chance to listen to the pre-event videos, please do so. They really are just short and sweet nuggets, so please take advantage. Don't miss that opportunity. So for the pre-event videos as well. In addition, on this event, we really would like to hear from you, receive your feedback on how it was for you, how useful. So the second bullet here with the SurveyMonkey address is where you can give us your feedback. So really would appreciate that. You also can share your experience at the Gmail address as well as our ADB leadership site. So please feel free. We would welcome any comments you have. And also, as Tim was mentioning, really it's a perfect lead-in. We're all looking forward to seeing you from Monday in Seoul, Korea. Again, we had this pre-Seoul event because we hope you will apply, whether it's the story of change or the 4 C's, that you'll apply them in the presentations that you'll do on Thursday next week, as well as when you put together and speak about your national action plans, and that will be a follow-on post-Seoul. So we really hope that you'll continue to apply the strategies, the tools, techniques that Teresa and Tim have shared with us. A very big thank you to the two of them for joining us and really sharing all of their experiences with us. Again, Teresa, Tim, it'll be a terrific, it's a great first, it's a great start for our program. And so again, real deep appreciation for your time this afternoon. Also, thank you to all of you for taking the time out. I know you're all busy finishing up things before joining us in Seoul. So thank you to you, and really look forward to seeing you all next week in Seoul, Korea. Okay, so thank you again for joining us, and have safe travels, and see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
John,
Thank you.
John, bye.